Shar Stories. Welcome to the next episode of Shar Stories. I'm thinking this topic of the wisdom of women should be an ongoing and possibly a multi-episode series. So here's part 2, or what I've been thinking about upon further reflection after the last episode. I spoke about the potential collective wisdom of women and the invaluable documented resource that could be for women navigating the midlife perimenopausal transition. I think it's a gap in our knowledge for women, and that it is beyond big pharma or, the research that's needed. It's the knowing from our ancestors and the many who came before them, who learned about all the intangibles, the moon cycles, medicinal herbs, and hot springs healing, things of that nature. And they learned to use what was available at hand. It's a uniquely feminine resourcefulness that came out of survival and was rooted in the woo-woo-ness or magic of women, and was handed down to future generations of girls. It's something that doesn't exist, but something that I wish we had. And I couldn't help but reflect that I'm aware of my colonized view, which is part of my upbringing and the fabric from which I am weaved. I accept and I understand that my belief system, my values, and the life philosophy by which I live my life are deeply skewed. And I'm okay with it, as I accept and understand that I'm an imperfect human being, and it's just part of my story and my journey. This podcast isn't about me deep diving into Filipino language studies or immersing myself into Filipino traditions. It's more of an exploration of my learnings about the Philippines and how and or why it resonates with me, and the want to integrate all the many things that define us all as human into my unique Canadian female perspective. And now back to life philosophy. The Odyssey movie has recently opened, and of course I had to see it. I couldn't wait further for IMAX tickets to become available. And don't worry, no spoilers, though I'm not sure how I could do that with a 3,000-year-old poem, but I'll just say that it's worth seeing on the big screen. Now, throughout the poem and the movie, there is the guiding principle of Zeus's law, the governing societal mandate to treat others as you would be treated. A host is to welcome all strangers with food, drink, and shelter. It was essentially a guarantee for everyone of comfort and safety. And I know for Filipinos, there is very much a practice of Zeus's law, though probably not outwardly stated. That's why our family gatherings are so large, and that's why there's always so much food. There is this great animated series on YouTube that I've become a fan of over the past year, and it's called The Filipino Story. It's highly educational and beautifully drawn. In episode 3, titled The Greatness of the Filipino, it is carefully explained through the following 3 values how it is that Filipino people, I'll say, embody essentially some of the practices and values of Zeus's law. The first of the 3 values is kabutihang laub. Please forgive me for my mispronunciation of that. But essentially what kabutihang laub means is the goodness within. The series on YouTube goes on to explain that when we give kindness to others, it comes from that. It comes from the goodness inside of ourselves. And we treat others as equals, which is referred to as kapwa. And then Filipinos carry out the spirit of bayanihan, which is the doing things together for the common good. These 3 Filipino values, kabutihang laub, kapwa, and bayanihan, are directly aligned with Zeus's law, yet they are from different cultures and peoples, but very aligned in the proper behaviors and treatment towards others. This is interesting to me, as it's a guiding principle that still exists today, though not practiced necessarily to the same degree. When I was younger, I remember new family friends would arrive from the Philippines, and they would be provided with a bed and housing with one of my many family members to help get them on their feet. Donations of clothing or furniture were organized amongst the many families and often through the family's local church community. Those same practices I observed recently when we had Ukrainian refugees landing in Canada and in my neighborhood. And it was wonderful to see local families were housing and gathering collections of household items to support those families arriving into this new country. Those are the things that warm my heart and renew my faith and hopefulness in society. Back to Zeus's law and philosophy, it was believed by the Greeks that the gods would regularly disguise themselves as nomadic strangers or beggars to test humanity. And this is where my belief system starts to deviate. Whether religious or philosophical, I start to question sources of information and interpretation. It was only after seeing Odysseus that I realized I do not know any female philosophers. I don't think I could name any. I have not come across a religious or philosophical writing by a woman. I have read some historical fiction that depicted certain historical events from the female perspective. But again, that was historical fiction. No, okay, I'm wrong. I think that some women writers that I have read could be considered as philosophers. It's just not a label typically given to women, right? Like if you think about it, have you noticed that most female writers and thought leaders are identified as authors, researchers, or poets? Even Bell Hooks is identified as an American author and activist. She most certainly was a powerful philosopher with her writing and her divine feminine thinking. I'm incredibly curious about female philosophers and what their writing and especially their female thinking may be like. It's interesting to see just how far patriarchy and colonization go. That's going to be probably part of my next journey of readings to cram my brain with female thought leaders and philosophers from the past. Is Zeus's law purely a patriarchal view of societal expectations and norms? Is it only for political and theological reasons that it was followed, abided by? You can't help but wonder, might we have landed at the same kind of practices and social graces had it been determined by female gods and female philosophers? It is within our female nature to nurture and take care of others, whether that's a gender norm, expectation, yes, but it does and it could make sense for us to have landed on a similar kind of belief system, just perhaps without all the wars and bloodshed. It's certainly something worth exploring, and I appreciate seeing the humanity aligned across multiple peoples and cultures, and even across the expanses of geography and time. If there's a female philosopher you would recommend I read, please let me know in the comments. Or if there's anything I've shared today that resonated with you, please do let me know. Thanks so much for listening.
Sharp.